So, good morning, guys. Let's talk about why micropayments do not work for the news. And the way I want to do that is ask a question, which is, how much is the news worth? And I mean that not so much in like how much is CNN or a television channel, because that's basically just circus entertainment, but how much is a news article worth from the New York Times or the Washington Post? Or even more so, how much is a song worth? Right? Like, how much is a single piece of content worth? If we were to compare this to music, I think we can find some interesting analogies. But before that, I want to tackle like two problems with micropayments and news. There's the logistical problem and the psychological problem. And the psychological problem is actually the more interesting problem, which is, what is the price of news? So, I'm going to borrow a lot of my ideas from Clay Shirky, who's an NYU professor. He's kind of the Paul Graham of the East Coast. Anyway, I agree with a lot of his ideas about micropayments, which is that mainly it becomes very hard to price individual pieces of news. One, because there's plenty of it. It's not commodified. And that, just a fancy term for saying news is basically free, and an audience is used to having news for free. And so a person is unlikely to pay for any specific piece of content, even if the price is low, because they can get it elsewhere for free. This is kind of the same problem that the music industry had, where, people had problems buying CDs when they could just download it for free. So then the music industry got together and tried to do essentially a micropayment, which is you could buy an individual song for 99 cents, 79 cents, 69 cents. So let's take that example. Let's take a piece of news and let's put a micropayment on it. So psychologically, how much is someone willing to pay for a piece of news that they're interested in? Well, a few problems arise. One, if somebody goes to a portal on like the Washington Post or Vice or BuzzFeed News or the New York Times, every single article they look at, the headline, it's forcing the consumer to make a choice if it's worth them spending money on it. And every time that happens, psychologically, they're forced to decide, like, wait, should I buy this? Should I pay for this? And because news isn't really commodified, as soon as they're confronted with that little mental idea of, like, wait, should I pay for this? Even if it's 20 cents, 19 cents, 15 cents an article, most of the time they're going to be like, I'll just go search it on a different site. So psychologically, micropayments don't work very well just because it forces the consumer to confront the kind of cost-benefit analysis of every single article. Second, psychologically, they've done studies where when you're forced to pay on an individual basis, like micropayments, because it forces the consumer to think about what they're spending their money on, they're less likely to read news from a variety of sources, because suddenly they want their money to, have higher utility. And therefore, they're more likely to only read news they agree with, which makes sense in the sense that, if I'm going to have to pay for this article, I want to, read the New York Times. I don't want to read this Breitbart article. Whereas if it's all free, somebody may read the New York Times and then actually read the Breitbart article just to see what the person has to say. The Breitbart article may be rubbish, maybe middle line, who knows? But they're more likely to read a bunch of different news sources when it's free. So the consumer actually benefits when there's not micropayments. Now, on the reverse end, what about publishers? What's the best way for them to make money? Don't they have an incentive to have micropayments? Well, one, as you've seen, psychologically, people are forced to confront that, they're making payments and therefore, well, is this worth it? Can I find it somewhere else for free? And if I can't find it for free, well, then I'm only going to read stuff I generally agree with. I don't want to waste it on Fox News if I'm liberal, or I don't want to waste it on NBC if I'm conservative. So they're less likely to read from a wide pool of news. But two, there's no good way of pricing news. The music industry had the same kind of problem, which is that from a consumer point, people would rather just access stuff for free and pay a large lump sum. And you see you saw this play out with like Spotify, and then when Spotify came around, you then saw Apple Music and Tidal and all these kind of music subscription services, because people will listen to much more music if they're not forced to buy individual songs, they're not confronted with that consumer choice every time. Which is why, you see these paywalls really develop. Like Bloomberg, for instance, just implemented a paywall, following the steps of Washington Post or New York Times, which, will give some articles for free, just as like Spotify will let you listen to some music for free and then start running you and bombarding you with ads, telling you to like, hey, pay a monthly subscription so you don't have to listen to these ads. The news tries to take a similar angle. And that like here you can read a couple free articles. That way you don't have to worry about whether this was worth purchasing. And if you like the kind of sum total, you can subscribe for a monthly fee and then read whatever you want. Now, a more interesting idea might be to create a parent company that's a conglomerate, get all the major news publishers together and have one single subscription, kind of like Spotify tried to do with the big record industry labels like Sony and Warner Brothers, put them together under one distribution pipeline and just have one subscription service. That way you don't have to subscribe to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Breitbart, Fox News, all these, Slate, Axios. There's a zillion media companies, news media companies. So that way, rather than having to subscribe and have a monthly subscription fee to all these media companies, you just have one, and then you have access to, any articles you want to read. And that I think consumers might find value in. They might pay a higher premium for that. But psychologically, micropayments just don't work. One, because the consumer and the audience is already grown accustomed to news being free. And even if some media publishers were to implement a micropayment system, other news companies will be like, hey, well, we can get a larger audience by just running our content for free. So that, it's kind of, unless every media company decides to put up micropayments, they're always going to lose out to the media companies that have free content. And then on top of that, micropayments just force consumers to be more critical about how they spend their money. And when it comes to news, most people just don't find it that valuable. So I'd ask you, how much would you pay to read an article? And then, what do you do if you read the article and you find it wasn't worth your 20 cents? You can build resentment really fast that way. So that's psychologically the problem with micropayments. There's also logistical problems, mainly that micropayments, there's only, a few ways of doing it. There's the traditional way, which is like you sign up with a Visa credit card or bank account or whatever, and it pings your bank account or credit card every time you buy something. But Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, they all have, processing fees. So if an article is only 15 cents, they're still charging 5 cents, for that processing fee. So Visa and MasterCard are making out like bandits, and the media companies still aren't actually making very much money. Now, the second part is, people have made arguments for cryptocurrencies, and that's true. Cryptocurrencies don't have processing fees. You could maybe create a micropayment system with cryptocurrencies, but right now cryptocurrencies don't really function as currencies. Currencies, by definition, are an exchange of goods and services, and what cryptocurrencies have become are commodities. In essence, a store of value. People are just putting money into cryptocurrencies and parking it there, and then not spending it, hoping that it'll just go up in value and then they can cash out and make more dollars. So unless cryptocurrencies become truly currencies rather than commodities, I don't think you'll see that implemented as a micropayment system. And our current banking system with credit cards and Visa and MasterCard, because they have processing fees, it's just not worth it logistically for a lot of companies to use those systems. So you have that psychological problem, which I think is actually a larger issue than the logistical problem. And like I said, these are not my original thoughts. Clay Shirky is well researched and well thought out on micropayments. He's worth checking out. So yeah, that's kind of just my thought on micropayments. I hope you guys have a good morning. Oh, and if you're in the market for a new sweatshirt, I do have some high quality BostWiki sweatshirts. The name of Jake Paul, always be plugging, so it's like $30. Put a link in the description. Do this every day, might as well, right? Have a good one, guys.